Hey guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. What I want to talk to you guys about today is leader lengths. As you know, I'm primarily a braid fisherman. And as such, there are a lot of applications where we need to tie leaders to either mono or fluoro for visibility, for line shy fish, for stretch. There are a lot of different reasons that we need to do those things. But it's important to understand how long those leaders should be, why they need to be different lengths, what the different lengths are for. And over the last, I don't know, 3-4 years, we've had a lot of requests for that and just hadn't quite gotten around to doing this one yet. So today I want to talk to you guys about leader length for various applications. To start off, I want to talk about when you don't need a leader. Things that come to mind immediately: punching. That's the first one. If you're in truly heavy cover where there's vines and grass and stuff going every which way, you probably don't need a leader. You can tie direct to braid, you'll be just fine. Same thing with frogging. What else? Buzzbaits. Sometimes my buzzbaits, or most of the time with my buzzbaits, I won't run a leader. Just straight to braid. Basically anything that's either really fast moving and has a stout hook, you don't need a leader. Or anything that's going into truly heavy cover where they can't see that line anyway in the tangled mess, you don't need a leader. Outside of that, if you're fishing braid and you're not tying leaders, you're hurting yourself. You're getting less bites than you could be getting. The reality of braided line is that it's very visible. It's opaque. It does stand out in the water. Fish, most of the time, especially in clear water, can pick it up and are less likely to eat your bait. So, where should we start? Let's start with short leader applications. Probably the place where I tie the shortest leaders is going to be flipping. Now, if you're pitching, right, big long casts, that's different. There you can run some longer stuff. But if you're making that true flip presentation, if you're just going down the bank flipping, you don't want your connection knot banging up through your guides and back out, up through the guides and back out. So what I recommend is that your leader be a maximum of about 3.5 feet long. Short as, say, 2 feet. Any shorter than that, I start worrying that those fish are going to notice that braid and they're going to notice that connection knot because it's right there. It's not far enough away from the bait. But when you're in that active flipping, again, you just don't want that knot banging through. It's not an issue of breaking fish off. I bang knots through guides all the time, no failures. You just need to eliminate that from your head. That is not an issue. It won't be a problem for you. The problem is that when it's banging through, it can catch a little bit on a slow presentation like that, a slow flip, and it'll impact your accuracy. That's why it matters. From there, we'll talk about pitching, casting jigs, casting worms, all that stuff. Just regular, bait caster presentations. I'm running anywhere in a 5 to 9 foot leader length, depending on water visibility and depending on how often I think I'm going to have to retie. Just as a quick tip, if you're a tournament fisherman and you're fishing in cover where you're getting either you're breaking off or you're hanging up a lot, so your line's getting a little torn up and you're going to need to retie a lot, running an 8, 9, 10, 11 foot leader will allow you to retie a lot more through that tournament without having to sit down and do a new connection knot. So that'll save you a little time. Don't be afraid of those longer leaders. Crankbaits. Crankbaits are an application where I run a longer leader. We talked earlier about square bills. That was in a video, I don't know, a couple months ago. And in that video I mentioned that I often throw them on fluorocarbon, but Tim does not. He throws them on braid to leader. In that application, we're running anywhere in maybe the 8 to 15 foot length range. The reason for that is that as that thing is coming through the water, you don't want that braid passing those fish. You want enough line there that one, the fish see the bait, not the braid, and they see the bait before, or excuse me, they see the bait after the braid has already gone by. So there's a leader passing them and a bait. They're not having braid right here and looking at the bait. So a little bit longer leader there. Plus, when you're throwing crankbaits or any other treble hook bait, that longer line, much better shock absorber, will help keep those fish pinned. A lot of people like to crank on those truly soft glass rods. I do use really soft rods, not generally glass rods, but very soft rods. And I oftentimes will go even a power lighter than normal because I am running braid on a lot of those applications. And when you go a power down, it accommodates that braid. We do not have trouble with fish coming off on crankbaits because we're using braid. That's a fallacy. You don't need to be cranking on mono. You can crank on fluoro if you want, but you can also definitely be cranking on braid to a leader. The application where we run the longest leaders, that's going to be true finesse fishing. When we're out there, whether it's a spinning rod or a bait caster, but usually a spinning rod, when we're running those long spinning rods, this often applies most to spotted bass fishing or smallmouth fishing. But when we're running those long, very light spinning rods, we're running light braid. By light, I'm talking 10 to 15 pound braid. When we put leaders on those, we run them long. Anywhere from 15 to 40 feet long. I don't really go any longer than 40 feet. I don't see a need. But where that application is critical is when you're dealing with fish in ultra clear water, especially spotted bass and smallmouth. They are smart. I mean, largemouth aren't dumb, but compared to a smallmouth, they're not the brightest fish around. And a smallmouth isn't dumb, but compared to a spotted bass, they're not the smartest fish around. So oftentimes we find that when we're dealing with those suspended fish in the water column, if we're running a 5, 10, 15, 20 foot leader, when you're dropping through suspended fish, they'll let that bait go. And it'll get quite a ways down below them before they actually turn to follow. And we found that on those shorter leaders, when that braid gets to them, they never follow. They just let it go. But when we started running those 20, 30, 40 foot leaders, all of a sudden those fish will just turn, shoot down, because that braid never got to them. It's still that light fluorocarbon or light mono, depending on application. And they'll shoot down there and pick up those baits. Made a huge difference. Now you might be thinking, if you're running a 40 foot fluoro leader, are you really braid fishing? And that's a great question. The benefit of braid in that situation, I'm gonna answer that in two parts. First answer would be, for what we're doing, yes. Because we're in the West, we fish, sometimes we should fish very clear, very deep water. So in an application where I'm running a 30 foot leader, but I'm actually hooking my fish in 80, 90 feet of water, my braid is absolutely having an impact. It is increasing the strength of my hook set. It is getting a fish more solidly pinned. It is keeping a tighter line as I fight them up to the boat. Absolutely critical. Part two, though, would be you're fishing shallower water. Your fluorocarbon is a long leader. You're only fishing in 30 feet of water. You're hooking fish and it's fluoro all the way into the reel. You're not even getting down to the braid. So what's the benefit there? The benefit there is that your braid is behaving like a backing. Let's say your conditions completely change, storm front comes in, all of a sudden your 6 pound fluoro is no longer relevant. You need some 10 pounds so you can throw a better bait, maybe chase some reaction. You're not stripping an entire spool. You run that 40 feet off, new connection, line back on, you're immediately back to fishing. We know how expensive fluorocarbon is. It's a whole lot better to run on 20, 30, 40 feet when you want to make a change than 100 yards, 150 yards. So even when we're running those long leaders and fishing in shallower water, there's still a lot of benefits to having that braid in there. I hope this helps you guys. The biggest thing I want you to take away is that those connection knots going in and out of your guides, you will hear them. They tick through the guides. But you get used to it very quickly. More importantly, it's not damaging the knots if you tie a proper knot. The other fallacy is that people talk about never wanting your leader knot to go into the reel. Once you pass through on a bait caster, once you pass through the eyelet of that reel, they think that that eyelet will cut those connections. We do it all day, every day, over and over and over again, cast after cast, fish after fish, never getting those connection knots cut. Now, I do throw a blood knot. That is my connection. We've talked about that in the past. I do think that makes a big difference. And I throw a little bit more of an advanced blood knot. Depending on line application, there'll be more or less wraps on the mono or fluoro or the braid. It might be 5 and 5, it might be 7 and 9, it might be 10 and 6. And you know what? We're going to do a video on that too. Probably won't see that one today, but we'll get that one out to you quick too so you can understand those things. But if you're tying a proper connection knot, whether it's a blood knot or something else, you have no problem going in and out of your reels. Don't ever worry about that. Just get out there and fish. I hope this helps. I hope you guys at least got a feel for some of the different leader lengths we use. Again, just a quick review. Spinning, ultra finesse, that's where we go really long. Standard baits, we're anywhere from 2 to 15 feet and anywhere in between. Don't be afraid to reel in and out of your reels. Don't be afraid to go short when you need to. I hope that helps. We'll talk to you soon. First thing is going to be the square bill crankbait. The square bill is a compact bait, fits that general bluegill profile where it's a short, stumpy bait, pretty round. More importantly, it moves very quickly, very erratic, something to bluegill do.
This may be a better day than I think. This lake is starting to look pretty stacked. So we're going to run down lake. I don't know how well you guys can see, but basically I've got a big point over on this side and an even larger point there on the left, and then the dam down there in the background. And I think I'm gonna focus around those first couple of big points, although I gotta admit this stuff is looking pretty darn good. But we're gonna start out down there. We're gonna focus on some of that stuff and see if we can find some fish on the little bit of structure that is in